So just how old was Alma when he was converted? When the angel appeared to him, the sons of Mosiah, how old was Alma? We don't know. We're not told exactly how old he was. In the Book of Mormon, there are only two people among all the Nephites that we are told how old they were when they died. And that's Mosiah II and Alma the Elder. Alma the Elder was 82 years old when he died. And that happened about 9 years after Alma the Younger was converted. Alma the Younger being converted at around 100 BC, and Alma the Elder died in about 91 BC. So if he was 82 when he died, then he was 73 when Alma the Younger was converted. So how old was Alma the Younger? Now most people, in my experience, and even myself when I was younger, thought that he was about 22 years old at the time of his conversion. But consider that. If he was 22 when he was converted and his father was 73, that means he was born when his father was 51. Possible, but unlikely. But let's take that assumption of 22 years for now, and we'll plug it into our little chart here. He was 22 years old when he was converted. This occurs 9 years before the reign of the judges. He is translated in the 19th year of the reign of the judges. 19 plus 9 is 28. Add the 22, that makes him 50 years old when he died. Possible. But let us consider his son Helaman. Let us give us the widest range we can here and say that Helaman is born, when Alma the Younger is 18. Now we could go a little younger, it's still possible. I mean, some guys in the Old Testament are born when their father is like 14, so it's possible, but I think 18 is a good estimate. So if he's 18 when Helaman was born, then Helaman was 4 years old when Alma is converted. He is 32 years old when Alma is translated. And he dies in the 35th year of the reign of the judges. That's only 16 years later. If he's 32 when his father is translated, he dies at the age of 48. Maybe. I mean, he was involved in all those wars with Moroni. Maybe. But then let us look at his son Helaman II. If we do the same thing and say he was born when his father was 18, that means that he was 30 when his father Helaman I dies. Now, Helaman II dies in the 53rd year of the reign of the judges. This is 18 years after his father died. If he was 30 when his father died, then he also dies at the age of 48. One of them dying that young might make sense, might get away with that, but both of them seems very unlikely. And then we take his son Nephi, and we do the same thing. Nephi being born when he is 18, which means Nephi is 30 when he dies. Now Nephi is translated in the 91st year of the reign of the judges. That was 38 years later, so he's 67, 68 years old when he dies. Well, when he's also translated. That makes a little more sense. So when we look at this, we got Alma translated at 50, Helaman dies at 48, Helaman dies at 48, and Nephi is translated at 67. Of course, that poses a small difficulty with his son Nephi, who is the disciple of Christ. Now we know the disciples of Christ, except for the three that are translated, they all die at the age of 72. Now, Nephi, the son of Nephi, he becomes high priest in the year that Christ is born. He becomes a disciple of Christ 33 years later, when Christ visits. Even if we put his age way down young and say he was 20 when he became the high priest at the birth of Christ, well, then he's born when his father is 47 years old. Again, possible, just like Alma the Younger being born when his father is 51, not likely. And that means he would be 53 when he becomes a disciple, allowing him to live 19 years before he reaches the age of 72 and is either translated or dies. So that actually kind of works. And so even with that, we still have Alma at 50, Helaman 48, Nephi 67. This doesn't make any sense. So Alma the Elder is 73 at the time that his son is converted. What makes sense for Alma the Younger? What makes sense for his son? How old was Alma? Suppose that we start with Alma the Younger being born when his father is 18. Instead of assuming his age at his conversion, let us use the same calculation and put him as being born when his father is 18. Well, if he was born when his father was 18, 73 minus 18 puts him at 55 years old at the time of his conversion. He is translated 28 years later. That puts him at 83 when he's translated. That makes more sense. Now, I don't think he was actually that old. I think that's a little too old. So what if we instead bring him down a little younger? Because remember, Alma the Elder would have been 18 when he was still a priest of Noah. unlikely that he had kids. He probably has his son in Helamanm about 4 years later, 4 or 5 years later. So let's say he was 25 when Alma the Younger was born. That would put Alma the Younger at 48 years old when he was converted. Now that makes more sense. 48 plus 28 years later that he ministers until his translation makes him 76 when he's translated. Much better timing there. What's the youngest we could put him at and have it make sense? What if we said he is 35 at the time of his conversion? That would mean his father, 38 years old when he was born. He'd be born in Zarahemla. I think from some of the other things he says later on that he is almost certainly born in Helamanm, though. I think 35 is about pushing. That's about the youngest you can get him and have it make sense. I think 50 is probably the oldest you can get him and have that make sense with the age of his father. Well, let us look at his descendancy. Let us take that young age of 35. What would that do? What happens with his son, with his descendants? Helaman, if again we calculate him being born when Alma was 18, then Helaman is 17 years old when Alma is converted. And he dies at the age of 61. More reasonable. His son Helaman is born the year after Alma is converted. And he also dies at the age of 61. Nephi, he'll be 80 years old. He definitely lives longer than the rest of them. But with him being 80 at the time of his translation, and his son being no more than 20 years old when he becomes high priest at the birth of Christ, that means that he is 60 years old when his son is born. That causes a few issues there when we get down to there. But what if he was 45? I think that's actually a more reasonable age for Alma. But also let us consider that maybe they weren't all born when their father was 18. Maybe they were born when their father was in their 20s. So let us say they're born when their father's 22. Let's see what this does for the timeline. Now we have Alma converted at the age of 45. If his son Helaman was born when he was 22 years old, then his son is now 23 years old at the time of his conversion. Which means that Helaman II is 1 or 2 years old at this time. When Alma is converted, he is already a grandfather. That also means that his father was 28 when Alma the Younger was born. Now, Helaman, being born when Alma the Younger is 22, makes it, we get his death at the age of 67. If Helaman II is born when his father is 22, he dies at the age of 63, same age as Mosiah II. That is very reasonable. If Nephi is born when Helaman is 22, then Nephi dies at the age of 78, about the same age as Alma. Now that still poses a small quandary with Nephi II, because Nephi II, he couldn't be more than 20 years old. I guess he could be younger, but you wonder here. If he was 20 years old when his father was translated, and his father was translated at the age of 78, then his father was 58 years old when he was born. That doesn't seem too reasonable, but maybe he was born when his father was, say, 53, 54. Still, that would make him 16 when he becomes high priest at the birth of Christ. Possible. This is one area that is just very hard to figure it out. Now, I mean, there's many figures in the Bible who have children in their old age. Many men do, anyways. And I'm not talking about just, Abraham having children when he's 170, but many men do have children in their old age. So having him have his son when he's 58 is still possible. It just feels weird. So looking at the timeline, if he was 22, as most people seem to assume, it doesn't make any sense. They're dying far too young. If he's 35, we can make it work. But if he's 45, things are far more reasonable. When I first did my timeline of the Book of Mormon several years ago, I came to the conclusion that Alma was 42, 43 years old. But having read this series, doing everything in chronological order, and looking at the dates again, and doing these calculations again, I'm starting to think he was much closer to 50. That he was 48, 49 years old. That he was translated maybe into his early 80s. But we can see he was not a young man. And on a final note here, one other thing that makes this make so much more sense. Alma the Elder, he died at the age of 82, and we know what year he died in, so we can backtrack and calculate exactly when he was born. And if we do this, we realize that he was 19 when Abinadi was preaching, and he was converted. He heard Abinadi preach, and he became converted. Alma the Younger, on the other hand, he's nearly 50 years old when the angel appears to him. Alma the Elder just needed a good word. Alma the Younger needed to be smacked upside the head by an angel, because he has been spending the last 25, 30 years as a hardcore apostate trying to destroy the church. If he was only 22 years old, how hardened could he be? How much could he be set in his ways? But when we realize that he's in his 40s, possibly as old as 50, it makes sense that he needed an angel to appear to him, straighten him out, while his father only needed the preaching of the word.
be brought to the knowledge of the truth.